Hello, friends and nonprofit leaders. Laura Zelke here. I'm the host of the Your Nonprofit Life podcast. And as we're winding down this year, I want to honor nonprofit leaders who serve people during some of their most emotionally tender times. Like I said in the last episode, whether from natural causes, tragedy, or the pandemic, I'm sure we all know someone who has suffered loss this year. In the same vein, it's also possible that you might know someone who's nearing the end of life right now, and hospice has been called in to help with nursing care, medications, and other medical needs related to a terminal illness. And so I'm delighted to introduce you to my guest today, who is passionate about honoring hospice patients in very practical and tangible ways at the end of their lives. Today, you're going to meet Jean Rosenbaum, the founder and executive director of Gifted Wishes, located in Oregon, but they serve hospice patients throughout the United States. In this episode, Jean shares how her nonprofit was birthed out of her own personal crisis and a desire to serve those right on the cusp of eternity. Whether a precious 1-year-old or someone who's 100 years strong, Jean's organization is ready to enhance end-of-life care with Gifted Wishes, which could range from purchasing basic medical equipment to cords of wood, or providing a wonderful meal with a longtime friend who otherwise wouldn't have the chance to come say goodbye. Jean's mission will touch your heart, and her enthusiasm for life will inspire you to set stronger boundaries and get clear on the things that matter most. Remember, nonprofit leadership is about more than the mission itself. It's about making sure that you're here for the long haul so you can move your mission forward without burning out. I think you'll enjoy this conversation with Jean Rosenbaum, who might just be the only nonprofit founder you know who took a selfie in the trunk of her Tesla. Hey, have you ever wished you could hear some good news for a change? Well, I might have just what you've been hoping for. Welcome to Your Nonprofit Life, where we remove our rose-colored glasses and explore what leaders are actually doing to move their nonprofits from messy to thriving without burning out in the process. I'm Laura Zelke, Director of Member Experience for the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. Join me each week to explore the ups, downs, and whoopsie daisies of your nonprofit life. Let's get started. Well, Jean, I'm so excited to be able to interview you on this podcast today. Thank you so much for saying yes and fitting me into your busy schedule.
Thank you, Laura. We really appreciate the opportunity, and I always love talking about my passion, but I also always love helping you guys because you've been such a huge support for me.
Oh gosh. Were you part of the original group that joined?
I was.
I was thinking that. I just feel like I've watched your organization grow and transform over the past 3 years, and it's been so exciting to watch the development. And we're going to get into that a little bit later in the interview. And before we get started, I was wondering, did you do anything on Giving Tuesday this year?
Well, we did. We've done a little bit of Giving Tuesday in the past. There was no real structure about it. But now I have a part-time marketing director, and she put together a schedule. And so we did MailChimp and we did some Facebook fundraisers, and we actually did really well. We made over $7,000. So that was pretty big for us for Giving Tuesday. I think people are just really ripe for that, even though some have been really impacted, obviously, by COVID in a negative way. I think there's a lot of positive impact as well.
Yeah.
So that was a good kickoff for our annual appeal, which will be going out this week. And so we'll see what happens.
Great. So Jean, I think that's amazing, actually, that you were able to raise that amount of money on Giving Tuesday. And what I have seen over the last 4 years, just even in the lab and in our own community, is that earlier people really weren't making a lot of money, and they were focusing so much on this match that Facebook does. And then they didn't get it because the money from Facebook and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation match, that whole thing has gone so fast that our leaders here got really creative and found their own matches and have really turned Giving Tuesday into a great fundraiser like you said, something to kick off the end of year appeals. So very exciting. So Jean, at the beginning, at the very, very beginning, I gave a brief introduction to you and your organization. But I was wondering if you could just give us a brief overview about what Gifted Wishes does.
Well, it's really very simple, and we only have a singular mission, and that is to fund last wishes for hospice patients. So these are patients that have very, very little. It's not just for any hospice patients, but patients that mostly can't even meet their basic needs. So it could be something as simple as clothing or a heated blanket or a large print Bible, or it could be something more like a last trip to the beach or a candlelight dinner or flying in relative to say goodbye or medical transportation if the patient wants to go to like a family wedding but isn't well enough to do so on their own. So we run the gamut of wishes, and we really never knew when we started what we would get, and they're always different. And they're always extremely moving. And it's just been an amazing trip.
Yeah, I would say so. I know that you went through some rebranding in the past 3 years. You rebranded. Prior to this, it was called Pacific Northwest Hospice Foundation. Is that correct?
Yes, well, it's kind of a varied background, but we started as actually a private foundation at Signature Hospice, and we never got our 501c3. And so I ended up talking with a nonprofit attorney who said, the IRS just isn't going to fund a nonprofit to fund a for-profit business any longer. And so the recommendation was that we change our name and that everybody from Signature get off the board. And so we did that. And so we named it at that point Pacific Northwest Hospice Foundation. And then I got laid off. And so I went and incorporated the foundation as a community charity. So it did start as Pacific Northwest Hospice Foundation. Over time, we found that name to be sort of limiting. And it wasn't a really good description of what we do, because we had people calling all the time looking for hospice services. And we also found that there were people in other states who would say, I would like to donate. I have friends who would like to donate, but they're not really interested in donating to something that's primarily in Oregon. And so I felt like we were really limiting ourselves by our name in so many ways.
Yeah, I guess so. You're the founder of Gifted Wishes. Now, you were on the board at Signature Hospice. How did you end up on the board at Signature Hospice?
So I believe it was the president of Signature that had this idea of creating the foundation in the first place. And at that point, I believe I was the marketing director, and I got very excited about the idea. And I asked if I could build the board, because I knew quite a few people in the medical community. I just knew a lot of people. And so we did want some people from Signature to be on the board. And so I was on the board, and there were about 3 of us.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, because I kind of know the answer, but I wanted you to share, how is it that you knew so many people in the medical community?
Well, I have 11 physicians in my immediate family. And so I feel like my whole life has been kind of medically related. And I have spent the last 40 plus years in medical marketing. Originally, when I first started working, I went to work for my brother, who is a neurologist, as an EEG tech. And then my other brother is a neurosurgeon, and he was just coming back out to Portland from Mayo Clinic, where he did his training, and he wanted to have an EEG tech doing the studies during carotid endarterectomies. And nobody in Portland was doing that. And so there was no way to be trained for that. So they invited me back to Mayo Clinic to do the studies there, which was really a highlight of my life,
Wow.
having both of my brothers there. And so I studied that there. And then there wasn't any formal training for EEG techs at all in Portland anyway. And so I actually spent my time studying at our local medical school, Oregon Health Sciences University, and also the Veterans Hospital. So I had quite a background in neurology just from all that.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. 11 members of your family are doctors or surgeons. And were you ever pressured to go into that type of thing, or did you have a desire to go into the medical field at all?
Well, it was really quite the opposite. I wanted to be a dentist. I don't think anybody really even knows that, but I wanted to be a dentist. And so I actually went back to college to get my science courses that I hadn't gotten with my BA. But I really had no support from my family to do that kind of thing. And ultimately, it didn't work out. And I ended up getting my master's in counseling. So I took a whole different
Wow.
course.
I guess so. So a master's in counseling and then going in and being an EEG tech. And I know some of the background, like I've seen you also do photography, right?
Yes, for sure. I've been doing photography since I was a child, really, but seriously, since probably 1969, I've been doing photography on some professional level. And at one point, after I was finished with my EEGs and working at the hospital, I wanted to start a commercial photography business. And I ended up starting a total advertising business because my first client wanted full service advertising, wanted more than the photography. So I ended up doing that for 8.5 years. That was a wonderful career, but it's really tough putting yourself out there. Artistically, it's really hard because people tend to criticize, and I just felt like it was too hard, and it was physically very demanding because I carried so much studio equipment around.
Right.
So then I decided that I wanted to be an auto broker.
An auto broker?
And I know, I see how these match, not exactly. But I had purchased cars from an auto broker and I'd loved cars my whole life. And so I just decided that's what I want to do. And so I looked around for somebody to help tell me how to get started, and I couldn't really get any help. So I just started to go out on my own, and it grew gradually. And that was 27 years ago.
Wow. So I have two questions for you. So you said you've loved cars pretty much your whole life. What was your favorite car when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, well, it depends on what kid age.
First one.
My first car was a Mazda. I don't even remember what model it was, but that was cool. But my favorite one, I think, was a Fiat X19. They were kind of wedge shape, and it was a convertible, but a hardtop convertible. I was so in love with that car. I just washed it constantly.
That is so funny. When I was in high school, I went to one prom, just one. And the guy who took me to the prom had an X19.
Is that right?
Yes. And I loved that car.
Oh my God.
He, not so much, but the car, definitely.
Oh, it's fun.
And I want you to tell the listeners about what you're into these days. Like, what are you driving around these days?
Well, I have more cars than I need, that's for sure. But favorite car that I bought 2.5 years ago was a Tesla. And that has just been an amazing experience. It drives itself. And I've got full self-driving, and they do have the capabilities now. And I took a trip to Spokane. I live in Portland in that car, and it really drove us there. And it was so relaxing, and the scenery was gorgeous, and it just is amazing, amazing car. So that's been a lot of fun. And then since I referred enough people to also buy Teslas, they gave me a free mini Tesla that my dogs have enjoyed.
And I have seen the videos of your dogs in that mini Tesla. I will see if we can get a link to one of your videos and share that because it's so cute.
Yeah, it reminds me of my childhood because, like I said, I've always loved cars. I remember when I was like 2, sitting in a cardboard box and pretending like I was driving. And then we had a lawnmower that was a riding lawnmower, and I took the cutting blades off and I drove it all around the neighborhood. And I think I terrorized everybody with that. And I've been driving the mini Tesla around the neighborhood too, which is hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm full circle in the car business for sure.
Oh, I guess so. And you're also doing photography on the side as well, right?
I've really switched from commercial photography to fine art photography. I think that's what all old photographers do. And so I've had quite a bit of success in selling my photos, and I've had quite a few shows, and I've had a lot of international recognition with some photos in probably about 10 different countries. So it's a little more than a hobby, but it's one of the things that really keeps me going.
So my question for you is, you're doing the auto brokering, you're selling your art. And I know you're still doing a little bit of marketing work as well. How do you find time to run your nonprofit? And what has really catalyzed your desire to also be running a nonprofit at the same time you're doing all this other stuff? It seems like you're very entrepreneurial.
Well, I never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur, but when I think about it and I tell people all of the things that I've done, it makes it sound like I'm well over 100 years old to have fit it all in. I think I'm a lot like my dad. When he retired, I thought he would be the best retired person because he had so many interests. And I don't think he lasted more than a couple weeks. And he came back to work he was a surgeon, and he came back to work with my brother, who's a neurosurgeon, as his surgical assistant. And he didn't retire until his 90th birthday. And the only reason that he did was because he had Parkinson's. It was really too hard to do the work, and also because my mom was ill. So that's the influence that I've had.
Wow.
I like to keep busy. I like to do a lot of different things. But the thing about the foundation is it's my legacy. I don't have any children. And during the times that I feel like I can't do it anymore, I think about how many people would suffer if we weren't in existence, because there really is not another foundation in the region that does exactly what we do.
Yeah. And what you do is so important. Again, just to touch on it, what you were sharing earlier is you get requests from people to do something for a loved one. Is that how it works? Or do people ever request for themselves?
Well, basically, the way hospice works is it really is about making the patient's last days as comfortable, as joyful, as connected to the family as possible. And so we base the foundation on the concept of hospice care. And what happens is we have either a social worker or a chaplain who will generally make the requests. So in other words, they've already vetted the patient, and we know when we get the request that that patient really has nothing. And honestly, in over 10 years of being in this business, I think I've only turned down maybe 2 people that were just really off the wall requests because they have no other avenues, basically. And we want to be there for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of curious, has COVID impacted you at all this year with the pandemic and the tremendous loss of life that we've seen here in the United States? I kind of wonder because with hospice, a lot of times there's a longer runway, I guess, to the final, I don't know, this is a really bad analogy, but the final passing, there's a little bit of a runway there that gives you some time to meet those needs. And COVID just seems like it comes in and destroys people's lives. Have you noticed anything different with COVID this year?
Well, one of the things is that a lot of nonprofits are closing. I mean, there's so many people that are unable to keep their doors open, whether they're for profit or not for profit. And we wanted to help address the problems. I mean, because we've been there for floods and for tornadoes. I mean, we've been funding in Texas, and we've funded for the fires down in California. And so the thing that we thought we could do, that we could help, would be to provide tablets to hospice patients so that they weren't completely cut off from their loved ones.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So we did do a little fundraiser for that. And so we've been funding the tablets wherever they were requested. I know that's become a big thing for COVID patients as well. But of course, our mission is hospice patients, and we only fund hospice patients.
Yeah. So that's why I was wondering, with COVID, they don't necessarily have time to call in hospice for what's going on with COVID. So
no, I don't think. But, you mentioned something about the runway of longer period of time with hospice patients. Actually, one of the surprising things that I have found is that a lot of people don't even receive their wish. And I fund right away. I mean, literally, a lot of people get their wishes within 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
I accept the request immediately. And so a lot of the things that we provide are wishes through Amazon Smile. And so, it takes only 2 days for them to get their wish. But what I was leading up to was the fact that one of the things about hospice, people, a lot of times they feel like they're giving up by getting onto hospice. And it's just not. It's absolutely so untrue. It is like a whole another layer of support. And a lot of people actually graduate off hospice because they've been supported and they get their pain under control and that kind of thing. But the other thing is, the part that I was saying, they don't tend to be on hospice for a long time because I think even medical doctors don't necessarily say you need to get on hospice. And so sometimes people are only on it for 24 hours or for 5 or 6 days.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
guess it just depends. I've only had a couple experiences with hospice myself with my grandfather. And it seemed like whenever we would call in hospice, then he would really rally. And like you said, kind of graduate back off of it for a while.
right.
And then with my father-in-law, I want to say it was maybe a week or 2 weeks. So it was a lot more, like a lot closer to the end when hospice was called in. But your mission is just, it's sweet and it's so kind. And the fact that you're really giving it to people who need it, and that these needs are being vetted by folks that you trust.
Absolutely.
I think that what you've done is really create, like you said, a legacy that is going to continue on far beyond when you're able to, be sitting at the helm driving the car. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But let me ask you this, though, because let's see, we're doing photography, we are being an auto broker, we're doing a little bit of marketing. We're running a nonprofit, gifting wishes right away. How are you as far as like the time management goes? Like, how are you doing all this stuff in just like a normal schedule? Or do you basically work 24/7?
24/7. Yeah, that's probably it. There'll never be enough hours in the day. And being a nonprofit CEO can be lonely and overwhelming. And you really have to be aware of losing yourself in the job. So I think I went on for at least 11 years functioning at about 150%. And it burned me out and really gave me kind of a bad attitude for a while. And ultimately, I don't think I was helping the organization. And a couple things that happened that just made me really, really step back and take a look. And I haven't been that healthy in the first place. And I know that I wasn't doing anything to help my health in the way that I was working. And so I just started to set boundaries. And one of the things that I've been doing is I leave my desk when I feel overwhelmed. And I feel like I don't even have 5 minutes that I can spare, but I go outside and I dig in the earth and I work in my yard just really, really hard. And although that might take an hour or so away from the tasks, when I come back, I have so much clearer vision and focus and really a renewed energy. So these things build positively. When you start trying something new that's really in a positive direction, it just builds on itself. And I found that to be so successful. So I'm really getting better at it than I was. I'm trying to learn to say no. And I probably haven't done that good of a job with the board. The reactions haven't necessarily been 100% positive, because it's sometimes difficult to figure out how to say no without sounding negative. But I always in the back of my head is something that Joan Gary once answered the question. When somebody asks you to do something they feel you can't do, that you respond, if I do this, what thing am I doing now that you're willing to have me give up? And I just love that. I always think of it. I've never said it, but one of these days I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
So thank Joan for another wonderful little nugget.
Yeah, really. I know for me personally, it's something that I have to work on. It's like you said, it's a muscle and you have to exercise that muscle. It's a hard lift at first, especially when we are raised and geared to be people pleasers and to make everybody happy. And it is not easy to say no sometimes, especially if it's a worthy cause. I know for me, one of the books that's helped me with that is The Best Yes by Lisa Turkhurst. And I can put a link to that in the show notes. And I'm also going to link to Joan's book because I'll just do a little
Yes,
plug here, but she rewrote it.
absolutely.
She rewrote it. It's coming out on December 22nd, and it's the second edition. Not only did she add stories so that it's not just her personal journey, it's also the stories of her coaching clients and people that she's helped through the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. She also added a couple new chapters on board leadership and also on small nonprofits. So we're really excited about that. But in the book, The Best Yes, she talks about the importance of saying no early. So, like, if you have a hesitancy toward saying yes to something, it's easier to say no early on than it is to even say, I need to think about it. Or there are buffers you can do, like, let me get back to you. And then you get back and say no. But the goal is to say no to things that you don't actually feel like you should do, because what ends up happening is if you say yes, it becomes this just mental energy suck. And also, if you wait to say no, it becomes a bigger burden that you're carrying around. So I love the fact that you realized or you recognized something in yourself that you said, you know what, I actually need to do this for my health, and I need to do it because by not doing it, it was impacting your service to your organization. So, and I want to just testify that when you and I were trying to set up a time to get together to do the podcast and do the pre-interview, you were very good about having your boundaries. And I really admire that you know when you're going to work and it's okay to protect the time that you've set aside not to work. And so I was really impressed, and I wanted to be sure that we talked about that during this interview, because I think that it's important, especially so many founders will just work themselves to the point of exhaustion. And like you said, it's not doing anybody any good at that point. And I'm curious, how has your board responded, or your staff? How have people responded to you being more protective of your time?
Well, the thing is, I think that they really want to help. I know, looking back like 3 or 4 years ago, when it was first kind of coming to a head, people were supportive. Like, well, how can we help you? Well, they can't help me if this is my personality. These are choices that I'm making. But I think that when it actually comes to the point where I'm saying no, the response isn't really that great, because, like I said, I always feel like I'm sounding negative. And I don't know how to get past that exactly. But one of the things that I'm just trying this now is I'm removing myself from the development committee, because I noticed in the last meeting, somebody said, well, we should do this. And I said, well, we probably can't do that because of blah, blah, blah. Okay. And somebody else said, we should do this. And I said, well, that's a really great idea, except that we did something just like that just a month or two ago. And I don't want to hit the same people up over and over again. And then somebody said something, and I just felt like I was being so negative, and I don't want to come across as negative. And so I just thought, I'm going to just remove myself from the development committee for a time or two and let them talk without my influence and see what they come back with, and then figure out, how to address that same situation from there once I've got some concrete stuff in my hand. Because, it's important now than ever that we look at diversified income streams, since we haven't been able to do our regular in-person gala. And that's been such a huge part of our income in the past. So we're scrambling. So the last thing that I want to do is to be viewed as negative and squelching these ideas. I mean, because I'm very excited that the board is coming up with some ideas. So I'm just removing myself from that scenario for a while.
That sounds very wise to me.
Well, I hope it is. Well, I'll let you know.
Well, when you were saying, I don't know how to say no, I had to grab my book because, like I said, this book has helped me so much. And I'll put a link to it, but I had written them down in the back of the book. I can show you. We're on Zoom, so I'm just showing the book. But I have them written down, ways to say no. So here, I'm going to give you a couple of them that she has in this book. One is a response can be, while my heart wants to say yes, the reality of my time makes this a no.
That's good.
Okay. And part of it too, which I learned this in counseling, is you can be done. Like that's the whole sentence. You don't have to give excuses or anything. Okay. Here's another one that I like. I can't give this the attention it deserves at this time. Sorry. And then you zip your lip. I know we have to try these out. Like, okay. And sometimes, it's like, okay, this is a good one, but I need to put it in my own words or it's going to sound like it's not coming from me. So I have to, figure it out. And so I had tailored one of them for myself because I was homeschooling at the time when I read this book. So I have, while I would love to blank, my previous commitment to homeschooling my son makes this a time in my life where I have to decline lovely invitations. So it's a no. So like there's ways that you can do it. Or another one is to say, I'd love to help. In order to keep a better balance in my life, I've started scheduling Fridays as my time for service and volunteer work. Or I've scheduled 3 hours on a Saturday. Like you're putting the boundaries around it and saying, sure, I'd love to help. I can do it at 10:45 on Saturday morning, and then they're like, oh, well, that's really not when we need it. And you say, well, that's when I've scheduled my time. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do it. It's like a helpful boundary, right? So I think that you're doing a great job with it, just from my own personal experience of understanding. And the way that you explained it to me was, I'm really protecting my time these days. Well, what am I going to say? Of course, I respect that. I want to be like that when I grow up,
I was mortified when those words fell from my mouth. Did I just really say this? I don't think I've ever really said this before to anybody.
I was so proud of you for saying that, though. That's the thing is, I think that we always assume that people are going to react differently than they do. And yeah, it might be uncomfortable and awkward, but when it all comes down, we want you to be the healthiest that you can be. And if you need to protect your time, I think it's beautiful. And I want to be like that when I grow up. Okay, I'm grown up. I just need to be like that. That's all it is.
Well, I'm 70, so I think I'm learning these things pretty late in life. But I could leave anyone with one suggestion. It would definitely be self-care and learning how to set boundaries. And sooner the better.
Yeah, for sure. So, gosh, I just hate to end the interview, but we have to because I want to respect your time. And so as we're wrapping it up here, can you just kind of tell us a little bit about what you've got coming up? We're in December, we're recording on December 7th. Like, what do you have coming up for Gifted Wishes?
Actually, we're in the process of trying to grow across the country. And that started with changing our name to Gifted Wishes, of course, which took away the Pacific Northwest Hospice Foundation boundaries. And we've got one big major donor that's up in Washington that is interested in having us grow, like, I don't know, to maybe have another office or something up there, which isn't necessarily the way that we will go, but it's helping our growth to go like kind of section by section. And we have actually been funding all around the United States. We haven't really advertised that we do that, but as people find us, we always fund. I mean, we always fund whatever we're asked.
Wow.
So I really see us someday, hopefully, as growing around the country and just filling the country. And whether that means offices or whether we just maintain an Oregon office, I don't know. So that's the main thing. And the other thing is just looking at diversified income streams, as I mentioned, because when you're fundraising and you look at the pie, 80% of your income should be diversified income streams and 20% should be your gala. And we have always been 80% is the gala and 20% is everything else. So we've been trying to change those percentages in the pie anyway, and now we're forced to. So, it wasn't like very good foresight to not have been a little bit more successful in making that change, which puts us in a really precarious position at the moment. So That's what we're looking at, is the changes that we can make in these COVID times.
Sure.
But we're still growing, because as we grow, we'll be receiving donations from those areas. And my goal, any area that we receive donations from, that is where we will fund. Yeah, so that's how I plan to grow.
I think it sounds great. And, a lot of people are starting to do their galas virtually and they've had really tremendous success. Have you guys thought about that, or has the board considered that for your
We
organization?
did have a virtual gala,
Oh, okay.
and it wasn't very successful. It really
Mm,
wasn't. So I don't know that other people, what they've done anything differently, but it
yeah,
came on the heels of those horrible fires that we had up here.
right. Yeah,
And so people were had their homes, on top of COVID, on top of the fires, on top of everything. The timing could not have been much worse than it was. And
right.
so it didn't really help us much, but we had already planned an in-person gala for April, which I had already $34,000 in sponsors for that and tickets that were sold for that. And so when we added it all together, we ended up not too horribly far behind. But really, the virtual gala itself, I'm sorry to say, it just was not successful.
Well, the thing is, that is a lot. Like what you guys were going through in Oregon back in September. I mean, the word unprecedented has been used so many times this year. I think it's lost its meaning. It really has been a difficult year all the way around. And yet, so many good things have come out of it. And it may just be a timing thing. I wouldn't toss out the idea completely because we have seen people have success with those virtual galas. It's just, again, the timing and the location, because somebody could have had one at the exact same time you were having yours, but in a different state that wasn't experiencing all those natural disasters. And it could have gone differently. And I also think we're kind of settling in, as a country, like we get it. We understand that everybody's just doing the best they can, right? And that the nonprofits are doing the best they can to raise the money. And I love the fact that you're really starting to look at such a larger footprint, to be able to serve all these different communities all over the United States with, when there's a need. So I have a question. Where would people go? Like, let's say that someone who's listening to this knows of a person who could really use some help and they're on hospice. How do they get a recommendation to you?
Well, I would have them go through their hospice and have the social worker or the chaplain go to our website, which is www.giftedwishes.org. And there's a really simple application on there. And they could also just call me because, I fund on the spot.
Yeah.
Need the paperwork, obviously, for my records, but my phone number is 503-297-5250. In case somebody has a question about a wish that they have, whether it's something that we would fund or not. And that
Yeah.
way they don't even have to spend their 5 minutes to fill out the application, because they might know that something needs to be adjusted one way or the other, or that we can
Sure.
only afford so much. I mean, we are bargaining with people these days when they ask for like a $1,200 Barca lounger or something. And I
Oh,
say,
yeah.
know what? We'll totally grant you that wish for a lift chair or something, but we can get some really nice ones on Amazon for maybe $300. Would that work?
Yeah.
So we've been doing a lot of that just to try
Yeah.
and save money.
Yeah.
Definitely just go on the website. We'll give you all the information that you need about us and how to apply for the funds, or else just give a call.
Well, thank you so much, Jean. I just have loved learning about you, learning about your life and your journey. And I still can't get over the fact that you have 11 doctors and surgeons in your family. That would be interesting. Wow. And I want to put some links to things that you shared. I definitely want people to see your photography. And, if you're in the market for a Tesla, you got your girl here, she'll hook you up.
I really appreciate this opportunity to share this all with you. And as I said before, I have so appreciated the support of the lab. You have no idea how much this has helped me over the years.
Well, it's our honor to serve you, because it's kind of the most fulfilling thing, right? As we get to support you and then you get to do your mission and continue and don't give up. And that's what makes our job in the lab meaningful to us. So thank you for everything that you're doing, Jean. I'll put links to everything that, if people want to check out the Gifted Wishes and see your dog in your mini Tesla or you in your mini Tesla, and also links to your organization and everything. I'll put all that on the show notes page, and I will see you in the village.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening. To access the show notes or share feedback on this podcast and link over to our socials, visit our website at yournonprofitlife.com. That's yournonprofitlife.com. And hey, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you're going to love The Village. It's our exclusive online community where we take what we're learning in the Nonprofit Leadership Lab and apply it. We take it to the next level with live Q&As, boot camps, online book clubs, and legit support from experts committed to helping you extend your nonprofit life. By the way, since we're just getting started, it would mean the world to us if you'd subscribe to the podcast and leave a great review on iTunes. The reviews will help us get the podcast in front of more people as we try to take the whole sector from messy to thriving. See you next time.